Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 407. I'm the host, Kyle Anzalone. On today's show, talking about the war in Ukraine, some news on the Korean Peninsula, increasing military tensions there, as well as Lindsey Graham saying he's willing to send American troops to Taiwan to fight against China. So, big stories on today's show. Be sure to share the show. It's hosted at the Libertarian Institute. We repost the show on the blog at antiwar.com, YouTube, Rumble, and Odysee for the video version of the show. It's up anywhere you can listen to podcasts, and you can find the show on my Twitter. The handle is at @KyleAnzalone_. I also post all the articles I write there, usually a pretty long thread with the articles. Also, if you subscribe to the Libertarian Institute Substat page, I post all the news stories that I write to there. And that's just another way that you can be sure you're getting all the content that I put out. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and let's get into today's show. All right, so first up here, we have a story on these leaked documents. And as I mentioned on the last show, I have a lot of questions about these documents, just because there appear to be a couple things that seem just inconsistent, I guess. The first being that these are, American documents, but were somehow, according to the official story, the one thing in the documents that are untrue are the casualty counts, or at least that's the one thing that's been identified as being untrue, are the casualty counts, where they play up the Ukraine casualty numbers and downplay the Russian casualty numbers, which, if these documents were maybe somehow obtained by the Kremlin or somebody at least vaguely aligned with Russia, then maybe that is something that they would want to do. But at the same time, then we have to explain how the documents get from there to there. Also, I guess, given what these documents show, it's interesting that Russia would want to make this information public and not conceal that it had these documents and, try to use the information that way. Additionally, look at the way that these documents are being covered in the U.S. Compare this to the Nord Stream bombing, where, we even have the Washington Post basically openly admitting that they're not covering it because Western officials don't want to talk about it because it's embarrassing, the truth behind the Nord Stream bombings, where with this, it's getting a lot of coverage and a lot of mainstream media outlets. And so it's almost like they want to draw attention to this story. So there's all those pieces that makes me just suspicious, because it's hard to identify what the motive of the leaker is, who the leaker is, and why these documents were leaked. And I want to leave open the possibility that these documents were leaked by the U.S. and the reaction from the White House is an orchestrated reaction, and they were done to in some way create either confusion, provide the Kremlin with disinformation, make the Kremlin think they're getting access to battle plans that, they're actually not, or, like this next story that Dave wrote up here, where they're saying that Ukraine is running short on missile defense systems. You tell Russia that, then maybe they start carrying out airstrikes at a different pace or something, and Ukraine's air defense situation could be better or worse than the Americans are saying here. So I guess I'm really trying to keep a very open mind on what's happening with these documents. I really recommend my audience do the same. That's not to say that we should be ignoring these documents, because they could provide a lot of true information that is actually critical to understand. In a lot of ways, it doesn't seem like the information provided in these documents is really beneficial to Ukraine. It doesn't paint a great picture for Kiev and their battle plans here. So That's just, kind of my thoughts on these documents right now. As more information comes out, I guess, I'll continue to react to it because, we have gotten, I guess, confirmation from the Pentagon that the documents are authentic. Now, again, that could have different meanings as far as if these are, they're saying that to create the misinformation, to create the disinformation, or if this is a real admission. So anyways, let's get into the story that Dave wrote yesterday for antiwar.com. Leaked documents say Ukraine could run out of air defenses by early May. Ukraine could run out of some of its Soviet era defense systems by early May, giving Russia a chance to achieve air superiority in the country, the Wall Street Journal reported on Monday. The journal cited some leaked U.S. documents that appear to have appeared online. According to the Pentagon, a slide dated February 28th, Ukraine could deplete its missiles for the bulk air defense system by April 13th and the S-300 system by May 3rd. One other quick thing to mention here, of course, the Pentagon could be assessing this in an effort to strong arm or to encourage other countries to send weapons to Ukraine. Another part of the documents that I forgot to discuss that I really should mention here are there's information in the documents that I guess say the U.S. is spying on South Korea and the UK, the leadership, the politicians in those countries. And so, these will again seem to be things that the U.S. wouldn't want getting out there and raises more questions as to how these documents came out. The document said the number of unprotected critical sites will go from 6 to 40. Russia began large-scale bombardments of Ukraine's infrastructure in October 2022, causing Kiev to deplete much of its air and defense systems. The documents say Ukraine was also on track to run out of ammunition for some Western-provided air defense systems, including the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems. The latest U.S. weapons package for Ukraine included munition for those systems, but those are being purchased for Kiev, which means they could take months or years to be delivered. The document suggests that the short-term solution, the U.S. procure more S-300 and bulk munitions for Ukraine, but most NATO states that possess the system have already shipped what they have to Ukraine. A medium-term suggestion would be to expedite the delivery of Western-made air defense systems. In the long term, the document suggests delivering enough Western systems to cover the whole country. The leak could spur more calls in Washington and other Western capitals to send arms to Ukraine. U.S. officials have told the media that the leaked documents are authentic, and the Biden administration appears to be scrambling to control the leak. According to CNN, the documents have revealed the U.S. is spying on Ukrainian President Zelensky, and Ukrainian officials are frustrated with the leak. So obviously there are a lot of dimensions here, a lot of things going on with those documents, and we'll keep talking about them on the show, but let's move on here. Intel leak, U.S. considering helping Israel against Iran for Ukraine lethal aid. A Defense Intelligence Agency document that has served as part of a trove of leaks suggests the U.S. believes it could pressure Israel to provide lethal aid to Ukraine. A photo of the document circulating online shows it lays out 4 possible scenarios in order from most plausible to least plausible that could result in Israel providing Kiev with weapons. The top secret document is titled Israel Pathways to Providing Lethal Aid to Ukraine and is dated February 28th. Antiwar.com could not verify the authenticity of the photo in the document, but its contents match the reporting from media outlets that have access to documents U.S. officials have said are authentic, including the New York Times. The first and most plausible scenario outlined by the DIA analyst is Israel adopting a Turkish model for Ukraine under U.S. pressure. The Turkish model means selling Ukraine weapons through third parties, but openly advocating for peace talks to end the war, as Ankara has done throughout the conflict. The second scenario is if Russia supplies Iran with more advanced equipment, such as Su-35 fighter jets, or expands support for Iranian weapons programs, and Israel responds by providing lethal aid to Kiev. The third scenario is if Israel requests expanded U.S. support for counter-Iranian activities in response to Russia allowing advanced conventional weapons through Syria. In exchange for the U.S. supporting Israeli operations against Iran, Israel would provide lethal aid to Ukraine. The background provided for the third scenario suggests Israel has already requested U.S. aid for its operations against Iran. The background reads, Israeli defense leaders are advocating for increased risk-taking to counter Iran, including proposing bilateral U.S.-Israeli operations. Israel has regularly requested ATG overflights in support of strikes in Iran. ATG refers to the Al-Tanaf garrison, a U.S. base in southern Syria. In July 2022, the Wall Street Journal reported that the U.S. and Israel have been coordinating on Israeli strikes in Syria that are launched from the direction of the ATG. According to the report, the vast majority of Israeli airstrikes that pass the ATG have been approved by the U.S. The fourth and least plausible scenario is if Russia incurs casualties from Israeli airstrikes in Syria and begins firing on Israeli aircraft, causing Israel to change its calculations on lethal aid to Ukraine. Honestly, the first three scenarios all seem fairly plausible. The fourth seems fairly unplausible just because this has been going on for years, and Russia and Israel have managed to maintain some kind of coordination to prevent any Russians from being killed by Israelis. Minus there was a shoot down of a Russian surveillance plane that I think that Moscow really believes Tel Aviv orchestrated. So, since the document was published on February 28th, Israel has dramatically ramped up its airstrikes in Syria, including one strike that killed two members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, but at this point there's no indication that Israel has pledged to provide lethal aid Washington desires. Axios reported on March 15th that Israel approved the export of anti-drone jamming systems for Ukraine, which uses electronic warfare to down drones. Israeli officials have said that this export doesn't mean their position has changed, since the system doesn't have live fire rounds that can kill Russians. The Axios report said that Israel first notified Ukraine it would approve the export on February 15th before the DIA analyst was published. The DIA document mentions 3 Israeli weapon systems the U.S. is hoping might be sent to Ukraine: the Barak 8 surface air-to missile system, the Spider air defense system, and the Spike ATGM, the Israeli equivalent of the U.S. Javelin anti-tank missile system. All right, moving on here. Leak shows Ukrainian SBU agents attacked Russian surveillance plane in Belarus. Members of Ukraine's security service, the SBU, were involved in an attack on a Russian A-50 military surveillance plane in Belarus that occurred February 26th this year, The Economist reported on Monday. The report cited a top-secret U.S. document that is a part of a trove of leads from the Pentagon and other government agencies that have surfaced online. According to The Economist, the SBU determined on the day of the attack that their own agents in Belarus had defied orders and attacked a Russian surveillance plane. The U.S. learned the SBU agents were involved in the attack by spying on Ukraine. The description of the SBU assessment is marked SI-G. According to The Economist, the acronym indicates material deliveries from particularly sensitive signals intelligence, such as phone taps or electronic intercepts, according to the officials familiar with the notation. According to what is believed to be a photo of the document circulating online, it reads, Security Service of UKR SBU officials assessed that its agents in Belarus violated orders and attacked Russian A-50U aircraft at the airfield in Belarus. At the time the plane attacked, Belarus Exiled opposition celebrated the operations and said Belarusian partisans were responsible. On May 7th, Russia media reported that Belarus's State Security Committee determined that the Ukrainian SBU was involved in the sabotage. And so I think this is my last story on leaked documents. Now let's move on and just mention this here. Moscow Bat official says Russia controls 75% of Bakhmut. The head of the breakaway Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR, said Monday that Russian forces control 75% of the Donetsk city of Bakhmut and that fighting was still raging. I can say with certainty right now that our forces control over 75% of the city, DPR head Denis Pushlin said on Russian TV. According to the Russian news agency, the head of the DPR said it was too early to say that Russia controlled all of Bakhmut and said there was still fierce fighting in the western districts of the city. Also on Monday, Ukrainian military leaders reported heavy Russian attacks. The commander of Ukraine's ground forces said Kiev's defense of the city would continue, calling the situation difficult but controllable. He went on to accuse Russia of using scorched earth tactics in Bakhmut by destroying buildings and Ukrainian positions. The leader of the DPR made similar accusations of the Ukrainian side, saying Ukrainian forces were destroying areas it retreated from. Probably both are true. Russia and Ukrainian forces have been battling for the city since August 2022. Russia began making slow but significant gains in January, but Ukrainian President Zelensky is determined to keep defending the city. Zelensky recently told the AP he fears if he loses Bakhmut, he will be pressured to compromise with Russia. Due to the heavy casualty rate, Bakhmut has become known as a meat grinder. Ukrainians are fighting on the front lines, have told the media that soldiers are being sent into battle with very little training, support, and ammunition. And so, there's been pretty significant differences between the White House and Kiev on what to do in Ukraine, particularly Bakhmut, where the White House is saying that, the city is symbolic, that it doesn't really matter. And Ukraine is saying this is critical to their defense. And if they lose this city, it could cause them to renegotiate and negotiate with Russia on this war. And if we're not deep enough in a proxy war with Russia, let's move on and talk about the escalating tensions with China. This from Day to Camp, April 10th, antiwar.com. U.S. warship sails near Chinese-controlled reef in the South China Sea. A U.S. Navy warship on Monday sailed within 12 nautical miles of a Chinese-controlled reef in the South China Sea, drawing protests from Beijing. The U.S. Navy 7th Fleet said the guided missile destroyer, the USS Milius, sailed near the Mischief Reef, a Chinese-controlled atoll in the disputed Spratly Islands. Taiwan, Vietnam, and the Philippines all claim sovereignty over the reef. The China's People's Liberation Army, the PLA, said the warship illegally intruded into the waters. China has indisputable sovereignty over the island in the South China Sea and the nearby waters, and the troops there maintain a high state of readiness at all times to resolutely defend the national sovereignty and security and the peace and stability in the South China Sea, a spokesperson for the PLA said. The 7th Fleet framed the provocative passage as a routine operation. Starting under the Obama administration, the U.S. began sending warships near the Chinese-controlled features in the South China Sea, maneuvers dubbed Freedom of Navigation Operations, or FONOPs. USS Milius demonstrated that the reef, a low tide elevation in its natural state, is not entitled to territorial sea under international law, the 7th Fleet said. The latest FONOP came as the PLA was conducting major military exercises around Taiwan in response to the Taiwanese president meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in California. The drill concluded on Monday and marked the largest Chinese show of force in the region since then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August 2022. All right, and talking a little bit more about those drills, the PLA on Monday declared an end to the 3-day major military exercises held around Taiwan. And of course, that was in response to the visit between McCarthy and Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen. The drills included live fire exercises and marked the largest Chinese show force in the area since August. Beijing strongly opposed high-level U.S. meetings with Taiwanese leaders as it views the contacts as an affront to the One China policy. The meeting with Tsai made McCarthy the highest level U.S. official to host the Taiwanese president on U.S. soil since Washington severed its diplomatic relationship with Taipei in 1979. China made it clear it would respond to the meetings in some way, but those warnings did not deter McCarthy. The latest drills, known as Joint Sword, were shorter than the exercises launched after Pelosi's visit, but according to the South China Morning Post, the Joint Sword exercises were significant in testing Beijing's ability to blockade Taiwan and launch precision strikes. Taiwan's defense ministry said it detected 91 PLA aircraft and 12 vessels on Monday, the most the PLA military assets it spotted during the 3-day of drills. Out of the 91 aircraft, 54 crossed the median line, an informal barrier that separates the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. China started regularly crossing the line after Pelosi's visit. Again, that was in August. Tensions between the U.S. and China show no signs of waning, as Washington is not backing down from its policy of increasing cooperation and support for Taipei. When Tai returned to Taiwan, she met with Representative Michael McCall, a Republican from Texas, who led a bipartisan delegation to the island. While in Taiwan, he told Fox News that sending U.S. troops to defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion is on the table. And a little bit more on Congress supporting fighting a war against China. I wrote this for the Libertarian Institute on April 10th. Senator Graham is open to using U.S. forces to defend Taiwan. Senator Lindsey Graham called for America to abandon its long-standing China policy and said he is open to using U.S. soldiers to send to Taiwan to defend the island. The remarks came amid escalating tensions and a diplomatic freeze between Washington and Beijing. In an interview on Fox News Sunday, the senator was asked if he was in favor of sending soldiers to Taiwan. Graham responded with a call to overhaul America's policy towards China. For decades, Washington has refused to say whether it would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. Dubbed strategic ambiguity, the policy has aimed to deter Beijing from attempting to retake the island by force and, at the same time, appease elements in Taiwan seeking to declare independence from the mainland. Graham said strategic ambiguity was not working, however, declaring, "I believe in a one China policy, but I would be willing to fight for Taiwan because Taiwan is a democracy. We stood with them for decades." The Republican senator predicted that hostilities with China could break out within a matter of months. "I think they're setting the stage for possibility of a blockade of Taiwan and that the Communist Chinese Party is going to test us dramatically this year and next year before the election," he said. Graham claimed the U.S. had only a short window of time to prepare for the coming conflict, calling to increase training and get F-16s they need to Taiwan. He also complained about a backlog of arms sales to the island, arguing the transfer should move ahead while proposing new U.S. military deployments in Asia and elsewhere. "I would move war forces to South Korea and Japan. I would put nuclear-tipped cruise missiles on all of our submarines all over the world," Graham continued. He additionally explained he was willing to send U.S. troops to fight for Taipei, a dramatic departure from the long-standing policy, saying, "Yes, I'd very much be open to using U.S. forces to defend Taiwan." Graham's remarks echo Republican Michael McCall of Texas, who told Fox News last week that sending U.S. soldiers to Taiwan was on the table and something that would be discussed by Congress and with the American people. Interesting that Fox News seems to be asking everybody if they're willing to go to war against China. All right, wrapping up today's show with another article that I wrote. North Korea tests underwater nuclear weapon, cuts communications with South. North Korea said it has conducted another test of its underwater nuclear attack drone, the second time the system has ever been mentioned in the public. The strategic weapons test comes after a flurry of joint war games by Washington and Seoul, prompting Pyongyang to cut a joint communications line with the South. On Monday, the state-run Korean Central News Agency, KCNA, issued a statement saying the DPRK, that's the name for North Korea that the state chooses to use, carried out a test of its Halley-2 weapon, an underwater drone which can be equipped with a nuclear warhead, according to the military, which it previously claimed the system could create a radioactive tsunami. The exercise began on April 4th and ran for 3 days. KCNA reported the test perfectly proved the reliability of the underwater strategic weapon system and its fatal attack ability. The system will serve as an advantageous and prospective military potential of the armed forces of the DPRK, essential for containing all evolving military actions of enemies, removing threats, and defending the country. Pyongyang carried out the test as Washington, Seoul, and Japan conducted anti-submarine war games in the waters near the Korean Peninsula. Prior to the trilateral military exercises, the U.S. and South Korean forces conducted the largest war games in the region in 5 years and plans to stage another round of live fire drills in June. North Korea issued a strong response to the drills, albeit under the guise of a KCNA editorial. The U.S. and its followers should never forget the fact that their rival state has possessed the nuclear attack capabilities in practice, as well as characteristics of the people and army of the DPRK, which do not make empty talk. It will be quite clear how the DPRK's nukes will be used if the war deterrence does not work on those who are running amok. And they're talking about Seoul and Washington there. As tensions have spiked, Seoul has reached out to Pyongyang through a joint communications line. However, South Korea said its calls have gone unanswered for 4 consecutive days. A spokesperson for Seoul said it was the first time since October 2021 that the two states had gone more than a day without communicating. Go Mong-hong, a senior fellow at the Asia Institute for Policy Studies, told the Miami Herald that Pyongyang likely cut the line as a response to the American and South Korean war games. It's unlikely a step towards escalation, but more of a tit-for-tat response against the joint military drills and much more elevated deterrence posture from South Korea and the U.S., Go said. While the U.S. and its allies claimed the war games are defensive, North Korea says the drills are preparations for an invasion aimed at bringing down the regime. The U.S. has parroted that the military drills with South Korea are defensive, the KCNA editorial said, but they can never conceal with such veil as defensive and routine their aggressive colors as provocateurs and the fact that their current exercises are deliberate military action prompted by sinister scheme to wreak peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula. All right, everybody, with that, I'm done with the show for today. Hope you all enjoyed it. I'll be back with more shows later in the week.